At the end of this module, you are expected to first define the various branches of biology, identify the different characteristics shared by all living things, illustrate how organisms are classified, and last, describe and explain the different theories on how life began on Earth. In science, meron tayong three major branches. Ito ay ang physical science, earth science, and life science. Physical science is the study of inanimate natural objects and the laws that govern them. It includes physics, chemistry, and astronomy. Ano ba ang kaibahan ng physics, astronomy, at chemistry? Sa chemistry, pinag-aaralan natin ang composition, structure, changes, and properties of matter. Kapag sinabing matter, ito ay ang mga bagay na may mass or amount ng matter in an object at volume or the space an object occupies. Meanwhile, ang physics ay nakafocus sa interaction between matter and energy. It is a branch of science that studies matter and its motion as well, how it interacts with energy and forces. Lastly ay ang astronomy o ang pag-aaral ng mga celestial bodies or extraterrestrial objects found outside the Earth's atmosphere such as stars, planets, comets, and galaxies. The second main branch of science is the earth science, which deals with any and all aspects of the earth, its lands, interior, atmosphere, and oceans. Nahati ito sa apat: ang geology or pag-aaral ng mundo. Second, ang oceanography, nakasentro sa lahat ng bagay na may kinalaman sa karagatan. Third, ang meteorology or the science dealing with the atmosphere and its phenomena, including both weather and climate. At ang pang-apat, paleontology, nakatuon sa pag-aaral ng ancient life from dinosaurs to prehistoric plants, mammals, fish, insects, fungi, and even microbes kung saan ito ay nakabase sa mga fossils or preserved remains of organisms. But for this module, we will be focusing on discovering more about life science or the study of life in living things. Living things are also called organisms. Life science is often referred to as biology. Actually, may tatlong major divisions ang biology. Ito ay ang botany o pag-aaral ng mga halaman or plants. Pangalawa, zoology or the study of animals. And third, microbiology or the study of all microorganisms, mga may buhay na di nakikita with our naked eyes. Halimbawa nito ay ang mga bacteria. To know more about the branches of biology and their respective specializations, kindly check the chart. Pero sa tingin nyo, may tuturing bang may buhay or living thing ang isang virus? Masasagot natin yan once we've learned the fundamental characteristics na common sa lahat ng organismo. A living thing pertains to any organism or life form that possesses or shows the characteristics of life. Una, dapat ito ay may orderly structure of organization. Organisms, if grouped according to their similar structure and functions, can be organized into the following levels. First, cells, which are considered as the basic unit of life. Kapag pinagsama-sama natin ng mga cells na may same structure and functions, ay mabubuo naman ang tissues. Putting all tissues with the same structure and functions, organs naman ang mabubuo, hanggang maging organ systems, organism, population, community, ecosystem, biomes gaya ng tundra, tropical rainforest, savanna, desert, at iba pa. At ang panghuli ay ang biosphere or the region or sphere on Earth na capable to support and sustain life. Smaller than cells are organelles or part ng mga cells na binubuo ng macromolecule, at ang macromolecule naman ay binubuo ng molecule, habang ang molecule ay binubuo naman ng atoms. Pangalawa, composition of the basic units of life called cells. The human body is composed of about 37.2 trillion cells plus or minus 0.81 trillion cells, of which red blood cells or RBC takes up 84%. Konting trivia lang, alam niyo ba na ang average lifespan ng RBC or erythrocytes ay 120 days? Pero saan ito napupunta pagkatapos? Merong cemetery ang ating RBC at ito ay ang ating spleen. RBCs are pulverized in the spleen where they are ingested and destroyed by macrophages na isang uri ng leukocytes or white blood cells. Ang nasa larawan ay ang dalawang uri ng cell structure. Meron ang lahat ng living things, ang prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Mamaya i-discuss natin ang kaibahan ng dalawa. Pangatlo, requiring energy or metabolism. Metabolism is a term that is used to describe all chemical reactions involved in maintaining the living state of the cells and the organism. Metabolism can be conveniently divided into two categories. Una, catabolism, or the breaking down of molecules to obtain energy. Second, anabolism, the synthesis of all compounds needed by the cells. In a catabolic reaction, molecules are broken down into smaller components and energy is released. Halimbawa, ang mga kinain nating gulay ay nagtataglay ng carbohydrates na isang uri ng sugar or polysaccharides. Sa tulong ng mga enzymes sa ating digestive tract, ito ay nabibreak down into simpler sugar na finally our body can obtain an energy from through the aid or help of our small intestines. Meanwhile, ang anabolic reaction naman ay kabaligtaran. For example, synthesis of polysaccharides tulad ng starch from glucose. Sa madaling salita, from complex to simple molecules, it's catabolism. If it is from simple to complex molecules, anabolism naman. Anyway, maaral naman natin yan sa Module 10, kaya proceed na muna tayo sa fourth fundamental characteristic of life. Pangapat, responding to stimuli or movement or tropism. A tropism is the innate ability of an organism to turn or move in response to a stimulus. Tropism can be positive or negative. Positive tropism is movement or growth towards a stimulus, whereas negative tropism is the movement or growth away from the given stimulus. Forms of tropism include phototropism, geo or gravitropism, chemotropism, hydrotropism, thigmotropism, chromotropism, galvanotropism, or electrotropism. Now, i-discuss natin sila isa-isa by giving examples. This is an example of phototropism or response to light. Check the picture. The plant grows towards the sunlight, which is called the stimulus. A stimulus is any change, either internal or external, which leads to a response or movements. At dahil ito ay toward the stimulus, ang tawag natin dito ay positive phototropism. What about ang growth ng roots? Is it toward or away from the stimulus or sunlight? Yes, it's away from the stimulus, kaya ang tawag natin ay negative phototropism. If that is toward the stimulus, positive. If that is away from the stimulus, negative. Now, how about this one? Which is positive, which is negative, geotropism? Since the force of gravity is always directed toward the center of the earth, ibig sabihin it moves downward, kaya ang roots exhibit positive geotropism, while the apical growth of this plant exhibits the negative geotropism. For this example, if that goes with the direction of the stimulus, in that case, the gravity, that's positive. If the response is opposite to the direction of the stimulus or gravity, that's negative. Other forms of tropism are the following: chemotropism, or response to particular substances. Next is hydrotropism, or response to water. Thigmotropism, response to mechanical stimulation or touch or pressure. Traumatropism, respond to wound lesion. And last, galvanotropism or electrotropism, which is the response to electric current. The fifth fundamental characteristic of life is its capability to grow and develop. Growth refers to a quantifiable increase in physical change observed in size, height, and weight. On the other hand, development refers to a process of gradual transformation. Check the caterpillar, it's increasing the size. We call it growth. Meanwhile, check the transformation of that organism undergoes from an egg to an adult butterfly. We call it development. Non-living things also grow. Yes, they also grow, but by means of accretion. It occurs through adding materials externally. For example, a snowball may increase in size due to the accumulation of smaller units of its own to its outer surface. The sixth characteristic is its capability to reproduce. Reproduction or procreation or breeding is the biological process by which new individual organisms, offspring, are produced from their parents. It can be asexual or sexual. Asexual reproduction involves one parent and produces offspring that are genetically identical to each other and to the parent. Second is sexual reproduction, which involves two parents and produces offspring that are genetically unique. Sa mga susunod na modules ay tatalakay natin ng mas malalim ang kaibahan ng asexual and sexual reproduction. Tumungo na muna tayo sa 7 characteristic of life, which is the genetic codes. All organisms store genetic information in DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid and RNA or ribonucleic acid. Commonly sa nucleus ng cells matatagpuan ang DNA, pero meron din naman nito sa mitochondria na tinatawag nating mtDNA or mitochondrial DNA. Alam niyo ba? According sa Human Genome Project, humans have around 20,000 to 25,000 protein coding genes. Every person has 2 copies of each gene, one inherited from each parent, one copy from the mother, and the other copy is from the father. Another interesting facts, there are about 3 billion DNA pairs. Tapos ang sukat ng DNA in each human cell, if stretched from end to end, is 2 meters. At sa 37.2 trillion cells meron ang human body, neurons are the only cells in our body which do not have the ability of regeneration. Unlike the other cell types na nagre-replenish or napapalitan every after a certain period of time, halimbawa, our skin will regenerate itself approximately every 27 days. Pero tanging ang neurons lang ang hindi. Pero don't worry, kasi the number of neurons we have in our brain is already good for a lifetime. So, tandaan, ang ating katawan ay binubuo ng building blocks of life called cells. Sa cell matatagpuan ang nucleus. Sa nucleus matatagpuan ang chromosomes. Sa chromosomes matatagpuan ang genes. And genes are made up of DNA. At ang panghuling characteristic of life ay ang adaptation at evolution. Anong kaibahan ng dalawa? Adaptation is the process of adjusting something to better match its environment or situation. Evolution is a broad term that refers to any change in anything over time. Moreover, the main difference between the two is that the adaptation is the short-term changes of organisms to suit their environment or habitat, whereas the evolution is the long-term changes that occur in the genetic level for better functioning and survival of an organism. In other words, those organisms that successfully adapted with the environmental pressures also had a greater chance of evolving. Those that do not go extinct instead. Halimbawa na lang ay ang nasa larawan. Humans have a remarkable ability to adapt to their environment. Rick Potts, who is the director of the Human Origins Program at the Smithsonian Institution National Museum of Natural History, said that it was within the context of swiftly or fast-changing landscape that humans evolved their sizable brains and capacity for adaptive behavior. So the evolution of the brain is the most obvious example of how we evolve to adapt. Consequently, the modifications that make the human species adaptable to the changing environment ay nagresulta rin sa evolution over time. Now, balik tayo sa question natin kanina. Are viruses considered living? Hindi. Viruses cannot be considered living. Viruses are complicated assemblies of molecules, including proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, and carbohydrates, but on their own, they could not do anything until they enter a living cell. Without cells, viruses would not be able to multiply. Therefore, viruses are not living things. Moreover, all viruses are obligate parasites, that is, they lack metabolic machinery of their own to generate energy or synthesize proteins, so they depend on host cell to keep themselves alive. Kaya sila ay tinatawag na obligate intracellular parasites. This time, talakay naman natin ang two groups of organisms depending on their cellular structure. Ito ay ang the Prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. Prokaryotes are organisms made up of cells that lack of a cell nucleus or any membrane-bound organelles, while eukaryotes are organisms made up of cells that possess a membrane-bound or nucleus that holds genetic material as well as membrane-bound organelles gaya ng endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, plastids, lysosomes, and vacuoles. The following are the commonly found sa prokaryotes, such as cell wall or the membrane surrounding and protecting the cell. Cytoplasm, or the gel-like fluid inside the cell where other organelles are suspended. The flagella, or the whip-like structure, and cilia, or the hair-like structure of cells which aid in movement or paggalaw, at ang nucleoid, or nucleus-like structure, which is considered as the DNA-containing area of a prokaryotic cell, such as a bacteria. Plasmids na matatagpuan sa bacteria and other cells which can reproduce independently. The living world has three major divisions or domains. First, bacteria, eubacteria or true bacteria. Second, archaea or archaebacteria or ancient ones. Both are prokaryotes or unicellular organism na iisa lang ang cell. Kaya under sila ng domain Prokarya. Based on previous classifications kasi, pareho silang under ng kingdom Monera. However, further studies identified unique characteristics ng archaea that allowed them to be separated and identified as a distinct kingdom. At ang pangatlong domain ay ang eukarya, which includes eukaryotes like Protista or Prokaryotes, fungi, plants, and animals. Sila ay tinaguriang multicellular organisms. Okay, aralin natin ang mga special features or katangian meron ng bawat division. Unahin natin ang domain archaea. The archaea possess the following characteristics. First, archaea are prokaryotic cells, meaning unicellular or single-celled organisms. Second, unlike the bacteria and the eukarya, the archaea have membranes composed of branched hydrocarbon chains attached to glycerol by ester linkages. Third, the cell walls of archaea contain no peptidoglycan. Peptidoglycan is a polysaccharide na karaniwang makikita sa cell wall ng bacteria or true bacteria. Fourth, archaea are not sensitive to some antibiotics that affect the bacteria, but they are sensitive to some antibiotics that affect the eukarya. Fifth, archaea contain ribosomal RNA that is unique to the archaea, as indicated by the presence of molecular regions different from that of the rRNA of bacteria and eukarya. And last, archaea often live in extreme environments, kaya sila tinatawag na extremophiles such as Crinarchaeota, Eukaryotes, Ethanogens, Prokaryotes, next is Eukaryotes, Halobacteriaceae, and Psychrophiles. Ilan lamang yan sa mga examples ng archaebacteria na kayang mag-survive in the extreme environments na very hot, very acidic, very salty, at may mataas na deposit ng methane gas, that a true bacteria may die instantly once it gets exposed to it. This time, alamin naman natin ang mga common characteristics ng mga organisms under domain bacteria or true bacteria. The bacteria possess the following characteristics. First, bacteria are prokaryotic cells na gaya ng archaea ay unicellular or single-celled lang din. Second, like the eukarya, they have membranes composed of unbranched fatty acid chains attached to glycerol by ester linkages. Third, the cell walls of bacteria, unlike the archaea and the eukarya, contain peptidoglycan. Fourth, bacteria are sensitive to traditional antibiotics but are resistant to most antibiotics that affect eukarya. Fifth, bacteria contain ribosomal RNA that is unique to the bacteria, as indicated by the presence of molecular regions different from the rRNA of archaea and the eukarya. Last, bacteria include mycoplasmas na walang cell wall kaya very resistant sa mga antibiotics that attack or destroy the cell wall. Cyanobacteria na isang uri ng photosynthetic bacteria, which means they can manufacture their own food or energy through photosynthesis gaya ng halaman. Tinatawag din itong blue-green algae. Last ay ang gram-positive bacteria and gram-negative bacteria. Gram-positive bacteria have a thick peptidoglycan layer and no outer lipid membrane, while gram-negative bacteria have a thin peptidoglycan layer and have an outer lipid membrane. Moreover, the gram-positive bacteria retain the crystal violet color and stains purple, whereas the gram-negative bacteria lose the crystal violet and stain red. The last domain ay ang eukarya that possess the following characteristics. First, eukarya have eukaryotic cells, which means multicellular sila or nagtataglay ng maraming cells. Second, like the bacteria, they have membranes composed of unbranched fatty acid chains attached to glycerol by ester linkages. Third, not all eukarya possess cells with a cell wall, but for those eukarya having a cell wall, that wall contains no peptidoglycan. Fourth, eukarya are resistant to traditional antibiotics but are sensitive to most antibiotics that are affecting eukaryotic cells. Fifth, eukarya contain rRNA that is unique to the eukarya, as indicated by the presence of molecular regions different from the rRNA of archaea and that of bacteria. And last, the eukarya are subdivided into the following four kingdoms. We have the kingdom Protista, the kingdom Fungi, the kingdom Animalia, and the kingdom Plantae. Protista are simple, predominantly unicellular eukaryotic organisms. Examples include slime molds, euglenoids, algae, and protozoans. We can further subdivide it into three classifications. First, animal-like, because they have the ability to move gamit ang hair-like structure na cilia, ang whip-like structure called flagella, at ang pseudopods. Pseudo means false, and pod means feet, kaya pseudopods means false feet. Another is plant-like, gaya ng mga sumusunod. Plant-like in a sense na kaya rin nilang mag-manufacture of their own food through photosynthesis. And last, fungus-like, Protista. These are protists, gaya ng fungi, obtain food through absorption dahil wala naman silang true roots tulad ng sa halaman. Ang mga halimbawa nito ay ang cellular slime molds, acellular slime molds, at water molds. The second kingdom under domain eukarya ay ang kingdom fungi. Fungi are unicellular or multicellular organisms with eukaryotic cell types. The cells have cell walls but are not organized into tissues. They do not carry out photosynthesis and obtain nutrients through absorption. Examples include sac fungi, club fungi, yeast, and molds. Third, plants are multicellular organisms composed of eukaryotic cells. The cells are organized into tissues and have cell walls. They obtain nutrients by photosynthesis and absorption. Examples of organisms under kingdom Plantae are mosses, ferns, conifers, and flowering plants. At ang panghuli ang kingdom Animalia. Animals are multicellular organisms composed of eukaryotic cells. The cells are organized into tissues and lack cell walls, unlike the organisms under the kingdom Plantae. They do not carry out photosynthesis and obtain nutrients primarily by ingestion. Examples include sponges, worms, insects, and vertebrates. Do you know this guy? This is Carolus Linnaeus, or Carl von Linnaea. Linnaeus invented binomial nomenclature, the system of giving each type of organism a genus and species name. He also developed a classification system called the Taxonomic hierarchy, which today has 8 ranks from general to specific. These are domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Let's have some examples para mas maintindihan natin. We human beings are under domain eukaryota or eukarya dahil multicellular, and at the same time may mga double membrane bound organelles ang ating cells. We are under kingdom Animalia, which means organisms capable to move on its own. Under phylum Chordata kasi meron tayong backbone. Under class Mammalia, for we are chordates with fur or hair and milk glands. Under order Primates, because we are mammals with collar bones and grasping fingers. Under family of hominids, because we are primates with relatively flat faces and 3-dimensional vision. Under the genus of Homo, for we are hominids with upright posture and large brains. And last, under the species of Homo sapiens, for we are a member of the genus Homo with a high forehead and thin skull bones. At para mas mabilis tandaan, pwede nating gamitin ang mnemonics na ito. Dear King Philip came over for good soup. In naming and classifying, Linnaeus used genus and species na tinawag niyang binomial nomenclature. Ang last topic natin is all about the theories on how life on Earth began. First, we have special creation, which believes that God created the earth, all life in the universe, all at once, very quickly and not long ago. In fact, according to a prominent British theologian, James Ussher, ang edad ng mundo ay nasa 6,000 taon lamang. Moreover, creationist states that species were created independently of one another. Second, these species don't change over time. And last, these species were created recently. Kaya di sila naniniwala sa theory of evolution. Second ay ang panspermia hypothesis. We have the Greek philosopher Anaxagoras asserted that the seeds of life are present everywhere in the universe. He coined the term panspermia to describe the concept as life traveling between planets as seed. Ibig sabihin, the life on Earth has extraterrestrial origin. It may have originated somewhere outside our solar system. For two arguments, una, there are life molecules gaya ng DNA, RNA, amino acids na matatagpuan sa meteorites. Pangalawa, is the presence of water elsewhere in the universe that reinforces this hypothesis. However, while water is essential for life that we are familiar with, its presence does not necessarily indicate the presence of life outside our solar system. And last is the spontaneous origin, or biogeochemical theory, which according to the hypothesis of Alexander Oparin and John Haldane, ang buhay sa Earth ay walang lumikha, hindi galing or nagmula sa labas ng solar system, kundi nabuo ng kusa, umusbong ng kusa. According kay Oparin, life originated from non-living material, which is popularly called abiogenesis, while Haldane proposed that the vast sea during the early formation of our planet and is still being laboratory for the formation of organic compounds that later on became protobionts, which is thought to be the precursors of prokaryotic cells. Their hypothesis was put into test actually by Urey and Miller in 1952. Stanley Miller simulated conditions thought to be common on the ancient Earth. The experiment was a success in that amino acids, the building blocks of life, were produced during the simulation. These findings give strong support to the idea that the first living cells on Earth may have emerged from natural chemical reactions. Walang lumikha, walang naglagay kundi kusang nagsimula ang buhay. In other words, life is an accidental byproduct in a random universe, in a random process. Okay, so alright, I hope you learned something new in this discussion. Stay tuned for the next lesson updates.